Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is What If Naruto Build Powerful Harem with Uzumaki Oldwomen Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. A young woman wearing a pink kimono and carrying a basket was walking through the forests of Nami no Kuni while humming to herself. She had long black hair that went to her waist, skin as white as snow and chocolate brown eyes that could warm the coldest heart. Ironic, given what her clan was famous for. For this woman was none other than Yuki Haku, last surviving member of the famed Yuki clan of Kurigakure no Sato and accomplice of the infamous and fearsome Kurigakure no Kijin, Momochi Zabuza. Though Zabuza-sama is about as fearsome as a wet noodle right now, Haku frowned at the thought. Zabuza had been injured during his battle with the Konoha shinobi Hitaki Kakashi. Haku unconsciously tightened her grip on her basket. Oh, Haku knew who he was. Zabuza-sama had drilled into her head the who's who of shinobi from the Big Five, as well as a couple of nukenin that they were to avoid at all costs. Haku mentally ran over Kakashi's bingo book information, Hitaki Kakashi aka Sharingan no Kakashi and the Kopi Ninja. Member of Konoha's shinobi forces, Jonin rank. Rumored to have copied over 1,000 jutsu. Son of Konoha's Shiroi Kiba, Hitaki Sakumo, and student of the Yondaime Hokage, Namikaze Minato. Skilled in all three disciplines but with a specialization in ninjutsu. A-rank threat, proceed with caution. If it had just been Kakashi, Haku bit her lip, then Zabuza-sama and I could have taken him. But the bingo book made no mention of him having a squad of genin. Hitaki Kakashi's squad of genin consisted of a girl with long bubblegum pink hair wearing a red cheongsam dress, a boy with raven hair styled like the back end of a duck, wearing a high-collared blue shirt with white shorts, and a boy with spiky bright blonde hair wearing an obnoxiously orange jumpsuit. Kakashi himself sported spiky gray hair and was wearing a green flak jacket with a long-sleeve black shirt and black pants. From Haku's vantage point up in the trees, those three seemed like your typical wet behind-the-ears genin who would have folded the second their sensei was captured. And when Zabuza-sama had trapped Kakashi with his Suiro no Jutsu, water prison technique, that's what she thought was going to happen. But those genin, specifically the two boys, and especially the blonde one, surprised her. The blonde had charged at Zabuza-sama's Mizu Bunshin, water clone, and had received a foot to his guts for his efforts. He was kicked so hard that his hayate was unraveled from his head and separated from its owner, landing on the ground where the water clone stepped on it. Haku thought that surely the blonde would have seen how outmatched he was and run, and for a moment it looked like he would. But then he charged the clone again and the same result occurred. What was that saying about insanity? Yet he got up again, somehow recovering his hayate from underneath the clone's foot. He's determined, I'll give him that much, Haku thought as she watched the blonde struggle to his feet and tie his hayate back around his forehead. But Zabuza-sama only has so much patience. If the blonde charges again, Zabuza-sama will kill him. The blonde charged a third time, but this time it was different. He had summoned clones, but not just any type of clones, solid clones. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Shadow Clone Technique. How does a genin have the chakra to use Kage Bunshin? And so many too. Haku watched with wide eyes as the blonde and a dozen shadow clones charged Zabuza-sama's water clone with kunai drawn. They all pounced upon the water clone, seeking to skewer it. Yet even with only a tenth of the original strength, the water clone dispelled the shadow clones with a single swing of its Kubikiribocho and sent the original flying backwards. Even with more of him the result was still the same. Haku relaxed slightly on her perch. The blonde had surprised her with his knowledge of Kage Bunshin, but even then his efforts were for naught. She didn't imagine that the blonde had any more tricks up his sleeve. A thought that she and, unknown to her at the time, many others in the future would have about the blonde, only for all of them to be proven wrong. Haku watched the real blonde rummage through his backpack as he was being launched backwards. He found what he was looking for and tossed it to his raven-haired teammate. It was a collapsed windmill shuriken. The raven-haired boy unfolded the shuriken, leapt into the air and threw it towards the water clone. A windmill shuriken? How do they expect to use that to defeat the clone? Haku was confused, until she watched the shuriken curve around the clone and towards the boy's true target, the real Zabuza that was standing on the lake and maintaining his water prison around Kakashi. Clever, she complimented the genin. Go for the caster and you disrupt the technique. However, Haku grinned behind her Oinin mask as she watched Zabuza catch the shuriken in his free hand. Zabuza-sama wasn't one of the Kiri no Shinobigatana Shichininshu for nothing. It will take more than that to defeat him. And even when a second windmill shuriken appeared from the shadow of the first one, the second shuriken going for Zabuza's legs, Haku was not worried. She was confident that her Zabuza-sama would prevail. Her confidence was confirmed as she watched Zabuza-sama hop over the second shuriken, all the while maintaining his control over his water prison technique. A good plan and a valiant effort, but there's a reason Zabuza-sama is in the bingo book and these genin are not. Haku felt a surge of pride in her master at that moment, as she watched the, surprisingly, skilled genin's last, desperate attempt shoot underneath and behind Zabuza. A surge of pride which was quickly replaced by shock when that second shuriken exploded in a puff of white smoke to reveal the blonde genin with a kunai in his hand. A kunai he proceeded to throw at Zabuza's head. How? Haku watched, dumbfounded, as the kunai raced towards Zabuza's head, her mind trying to explain what she just saw. Kawarimi no Jutsu, replacement technique. No, he was too far away and the shuriken was moving too fast. Haku absently noted that Zabuza had chosen to release Kakashi rather than have a kunai buried in his forehead, though Zabuza did suffer a cut to his cheek as he dodged the kunai. How did he do it? Haku mulled over the possibilities as she leapt to a tree closer to the shoreline, making sure she kept a close eye on Zabuza's fight with Kakashi. A fight Zabuza was losing. He was too far to replace himself, and as far as I know there is no bloodline that allows you to teleport. Haku focused on the blonde boy who was treading water as both Jonin cast the Suiryuden no Jutsu, water dragon missile technique, using their chakra to shape the lake water into towering, snake-like dragons which they launched at one another. Since the boy is treading water, it's safe to assume that he doesn't know waterwalking, which rules out the chakra control needed for summoning. Haku narrowed her eyes. The answer was on the tip of her tongue, but it was absurd. As absurd as Zabuza-sama, a former Kiri nin, struggling against Kakashi, a Konoha nin, in a duel of water techniques. And yet, as the two dragons crashed and exploded into a shower of water, a sign that both men were equally skilled, there was only one answer. The only other technique that generates white smoke is when a person dispels a henge no jutsu, transformation technique. But to henge yourself and allow your teammate to throw you at an enemy is simply, Haku's eyes widened as she muttered, insane. This boy, a genin, let his teammate throw him at Zabuza-sama. Haku looked upon the blonde boy in awe, and a slight amount of admiration. He directly put himself in harm's way, all to save his sensei. Haku was so lost in her thoughts that she was nearly swept up by the great deluge of water from Kakashi's Daibakufu no Jutsu, great waterfall technique. Thankfully for herself, and Zabuza-sama, she was able to avoid the devastating technique. She tree-hopped from the edge of the lake to where Zabuza-sama was blasted to. She arrived just in time to stop Kakashi from finishing Zabuza-sama with a kunai by throwing her Senbon through Zabuza's neck and placing him in a near-death state. Kakashi checked the body on the ground for a pulse, and though Haku was confident that he would find none, it wasn't the first time she had had to kill Zabuza-sama in such a fashion. Today had been a day full of surprises, so she decided to fill the dead air and hopefully distract the Konoha Jonin from looking closer at the corpse. Thank you for your help, she said in a monotone that helped her voice sound androgynous. I hope you don't mind my interference, but I really wanted the honor of taking down one of Kiri's more infamous sons. Kakashi looked up towards Haku with narrowed eyes. Your mask, Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's an Oinen mask from Kurigakure. You were hunting Zabuza. Haku nodded. Yes. Our corps had heard rumors that Zabuza had been operating around these parts, so I was sent to investigate and if given the opportunity, terminate. Haku absently noted that the female genin shivered when she said, terminate. Kakashi let out a in response. Though he looked relaxed, Haku could see that his body was still coiled like a spring, ready to strike at the slightest threat. I thought Kiri was still in the midst of a civil war. Kakashi began casually. Why would the Mizukage send out Oinen, especially one as talented as you appear to be, after a man like Zabuza? Thank you for the compliment, Hitaki Kakashi-san. Haku gave a minor bow. It means much coming from a man of your stature. As for why Yondaime-sama sent me after Momochi Zabuza, I was sent for what he bears. Haku gestured towards Zabuza's blade that was strapped to his back. Ah, Kubikiribocho, Kakashi said, sounding slightly sheepish. That is a good reason to hunt down Zabuza. But what if Konoha wanted to take possession of the blade? Kakashi asked with steel in his tone. Oh, Haku's eyes narrowed into slits behind her mask. How dare he think of taking Zabuza-sama's blade? She was tempted to throw her Senbon through Kakashi's damnable Sharingan, but a confrontation with Hitaki Kakashi, even an exhausted one, would waste time. Precious time. Time needed to remove the Senbon from Zabuza-sama's neck before any permanent damage could occur. Thankfully, her reprieve came in the form of a waterlogged genin wearing orange. What's going on here? The blonde shouted as he pointed an accusing finger at her. Who are you? Relax, Naruto, Kakashi sighed as he stood up from next to Zabuza's body and walked over to the yelling blonde. He's not an enemy. That's not what I asked. What I mean is, he killed Zabuza, who wasn't a pushover, but he still got taken out by a guy who's only about my age. Like it was nothing. What? Do we suck or something? What's up with that? Naruto finished his rant. Haku could tell by his tone of voice that he was still hyped up on adrenaline. Naruto, Kakashi ruffled his ragged, ruffian student's hair. I can see how frustrating it can be to see someone as young as you who happens to be stronger than me. Haku doesn't know why she said it, but she decided to offer the blonde some encouragement and compliment him on his efforts. Do not be so down, Genin-san. I watched your battle with Zabuza and saw how your actions were instrumental in defeating him. Not many shinobi would allow themselves to be thrown at a superior opponent, let alone volunteer to do so. Naruto blushed and scratched his right cheek with his index finger. He didn't know what to say. It was rare when someone complimented him. Hell, he could count on both hands with digits to spare how many people gave him a genuine compliment. Still, Hokage Gigi had taught him to always thank people for saying nice things. Well, I had to do something to save Kakashi-sensei, and that was the best thing I could come up with. Naruto gave Haku a foxy grin. Thanks, Oinen-san. Haku couldn't help but let out a giggle that she tried to hide behind her hand. She thought Naruto looked cute with his whisker marks and blush. Don't mention it, Genin-san. Though I might suggest you learn waterwalking before going up against an opponent like Zabuza again. Kakashi let out a groan at that statement and muttered under his breath, waterwalking, chakra control, how did I forget to teach them chakra control? As fun as this has been, I really must be going, Haku said as she used the Shunshin no Jutsu, body flicker technique, to disappear in a swirl of leaves from up on her branch to appear next to Zabuza's corpse, in an instant. You're going to take care of the corpse? Naruto asked. Haku nodded. Though Naruto's question, or rather the knowledge needed to ask said question, surprised Kakashi. Naruto, Kakashi got Naruto's attention. How do you know that he was going to get rid of the corpse? In fact, how did you even recognize him as an Oinen? Oh, that's easy, Kakashi-sensei. When I was younger, I would hang out from time to time in Hokage Gigi's office, and sometimes members from Anbu or the Oinen Butai would stop by to report. I asked Gigi who the guys in the funny masks were, and he told me. Naruto explained to his sensei as if he was explaining the weather. I see. Kakashi's sweat dropped. Sometimes he forgot how close his student was to Sandaime-sama. Although, Naruto rubbed his chin and squinted his eyes into slits, I thought the rule for Oinen was to destroy the body where it dropped. That is the rule, but every rule, like every law, has some exceptions. Like when an Oinen is surrounded by potentially dangerous shinobi who have something to gain from the corpse-like information, or, Haku looked towards Kakashi, something he possesses. Kakashi sheepishly rubbed the back of his head and gave Haku his patented, I smile. Message received. Say goodbye to the Oinen, Naruto. Goodbye Oinen-san. Thank you for the compliment, and the advice. I'll ask Kakashi-sensei to teach us waterwalking later. Naruto flashed her his patented foxy grin as he waved her goodbye. Kakashi's shoulders slumped, though whether it was due to his current exhaustion or his future mental exhaustion of having to deal with a hyperactive Naruto pestering him for training was up for debate. Haku placed her hand on Zabuza's chest and body flickered away. Haku paused, her brown eyes flicking to her left, catching something out of the ordinary. A tree nearby had been scored with notches leading up to its top. The notches looked like they had been made by a kunai. Why would somebody, tree walking exercise? What other ninja? Haku's eyes widened. The only ninja I can think of that would be doing the tree walking exercise are those genin, meaning, Zabuza was outsmarted by a genin who couldn't even tree walk. The laughter that bubbled forth from Haku after that realization filled the forest. It took a few minutes for her laughter to die down, but even then a few giggles still escaped her lips. She took a deep breath, to calm herself, then refocused on the tree. Whoever was using this tree has made tremendous progress for only a few days, she thought as she ran her fingers over its rough bark. I wonder, was it Naruto or his raven-haired teammate that did this? Though I know which one Zabuza-sama would prefer it to be. Haku released a sigh at her last thought, because it reminded her of the conversation that she had with Zabuza-sama shortly after departing from the Konoha shinobi. She had carried her Zabuza-sama's body about 2 miles away to a clearing where she took Kubikiribocho from his back and stabbed it into the dirt. She then laid out his body flat on its back on the ground. Haku knelt down next to Zabuza and traced her fingers across the two sanban in his neck. First, she murmured, taking out a scroll from within her kimono sash and rolling it open on the ground, I'll cut off his bandages. Haku picked up a pair of scissors from the scroll and brought them towards Zabuza's neck bandages. Only for Zabuza's hand to shoot forward and clamp down on Haku's hand. No need, Haku. I'll do it myself. Zabuza groaned as he sat up and yanked one of the sanban from his neck with a wet spurt. Be careful, Zabuza-sama, Haku warned, if you remove those in any other way you really will kill yourself. You're a sadist, Haku, Zabuza rasped, as he removed the other sanban. Always the neck with you. I pity your future boyfriend. Zabuza-sama, Haku whined as she waved her arms up and down. Don't tease me. You're gonna need one if you want to revive your clan. Zabuza chuckled as he laid back on the ground, letting out a groan dripping with exhaustion as he did so. He looked up at Haku. Take off your mask, Haku. The thing makes you look ghoulish. This ghoulish mask, Haku teased as she took off the mask, revealing her soft face and chocolate brown eyes, has helped save your life on numerous occasions. Zabuza rolled his eyes, deciding to let the comment go. What happened after you skewered me? Zabuza-sama, Haku pouted at his phrasing. Skewer was such a violent word. I spoke with Hataki. And, Zabuza raised his non-existent eyebrow. He asked why I was here when Kiri is still in the midst of its civil war and I told him that I was ordered by Yagura to see if I could recover your blade. Zabuza grunted. Good answer. Probably even true to some extent. Though I don't imagine that a man like Sharingan no Kakashi would let a comment like that go. Haku shook her head, causing the two bangs that framed her face to tickle her cheeks. He did not. He asked, what if Konoha wanted to take possession of the blade? Zabuza scowled, as his right arm unconsciously drifted towards his sword. Your response? I didn't have a chance to, Haku told Zabuza. We were interrupted by the blonde genin, Naruto I think his name was. He came storming up and started pointing and yelling at me for coming in at the last second. I believe that he was still coming down from the adrenaline. That Gaki, I can't believe he tricked me. Zabuza sneered, his version of a pout. He used a henge to turn himself into a windmill shuriken and had his teammate throw him at me. Zabuza finished, sounding incredulous. He turned to the side and muttered, still, the plan took guts. I'll give the kid that much. Uzumaki Naruto, I thought Uzumakis all had red hair. What was that Zabuza-sama? Haku asked as she finished rolling up her scroll and placing it back in her sash. Zabuza turned back to Haku. It's nothing. What else happened? After Naruto-san interrupted me, Kakashi went to console his student and I gave Naruto a compliment for his efforts against you. Haku giggled as she recalled the boy's blush after her compliment. The boy must not be used to receiving praise. She wondered, are those whiskers real? Sadist Haku, the wound's still fresh. Zabuza covered his eyes with his forearm. How will my pride ever recover? There, Haku patted Zabuza's shoulder. I'm sure you'll get another chance for payback once you recover. Speaking of, Zabuza removed his forearm from his eyes. How long is it going to take me to recover? 2 weeks, barring any complications. Zabuza frowned behind his bandages. 2 weeks. Any way to speed up my recovery? Haku's lips quirked. I recall seeing a couple of nice healing herbs in one of the nearby forests. They'll help speed up your recovery by a few days. Although, Haku narrowed her eyes at Zabuza like a mother who knew that their child was going to misbehave. If I get those herbs, then you can't do anything strenuous for the rest of your convalescence. Otherwise, their healing properties will become poisonous. Zabuza closed his eyes and mulled it over. If we wait too long, the chances of a real Kirioinen showing up for my sword increases, or heavens forbid, another one of the 7 showing up. I'd rather hand it over to Konoha Shinobi than have it in Yagura's slimy hands. Though I don't trust the midget, Gato, as far as I can throw him. I've seen the way he leers at Haku. And who knows if he'll try anything when I'm recovering. Can I risk that? Zabuza turned to Haku. I'll make my decision when we return back to base. Anything else worth mentioning from your conversation with Hataki and the Gaki? Haku tapped her chin with her index finger, thinking. The Gaki, Naruto, he did make reference to spending time around the Hokage when he was younger. Haku laughed as she recalled what he called the Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen, the current Kami no Shinobi. He referred to him as Hokage Jiji. Zabuza narrowed his eyes at that bit of information. Interesting. The boy could prove useful if he's that close to the Hokage. Zabuza was piecing together a plan in his head. If the boy is close to the Hokage, then he could be a valuable hostage, or maybe. Haku, how old did you think the Gaki was? Around 13, Haku answered, sounding confused by the question. About 2 years younger than you then. Yes. Haku narrowed her eyes. She didn't know why he was asking, but she had a feeling she wouldn't like where this conversation was going. And what did you think of him? Zabuza asked, trying to sound casual. At first glance, not much. Though he did surprise me when he used Kage Bunshin, shadow clones, and his plan to save Kakashi was as brave as it was insane. Yes. Zabuza nodded in agreement. He shows great potential. And what did you think of him, physically? He was a bit on the short side. Haku really didn't like where this conversation was going. Zabuza scoffed, I'm sure he'll grow a bit. He just started puberty. In fact, it wasn't until I was around 15 when I Zabuza-sama, Haku interrupted Zabuza and gave him a saccharine smile. The temperature began to drop as Haku's killing intent was rising. What are you planning? Zabuza repressed a shudder. Sometimes Haku was scarier to him than Kisame, and that man fed people to his sword. But he soldiered on. Well, Haku, as your guardian, I only want what's best for you and I feel like it would be best if you went out and met somebody. In other words, I think it's time you got yourself a boyfriend. Though she couldn't see it, Haku was sure Zabuza-sama's shark-like teeth were on full display in a full grin underneath his bandages. A resounding slap echoed throughout the forest and sent birds fleeing from their nests into the skies. Haku left the scored tree and walked a bit farther. The clearing with the medicinal herbs was just a couple of minutes away from there. The herbs would speed up Zabuza's recovery by converting his chakra to medical chakra, ensuring that his wounds would heal at a rapid pace. However, medical chakra requires the greatest of control. Like a surgeon performing open heart surgery, one slip up and you nick an artery and the patient bleeds to death. The same can be said for using medical ninjutsu. Should you surge your chakra and break that delicate balance, you risk crippling or killing your patients. Therefore, it's imperative that Zabuza-sama not be subject to any battle for a week after administration of the herbs, otherwise. Haku smacked both her cheeks to get rid of the negative thoughts. Zabuza-sama will be fine. He'll recover before Gato's deadline. Haku snarled. Gato, that slime. It was a day after their confrontation with Kakashi and his squad and Haku was still giving Zabuza-sama the cold shoulder. How dare he? She thought as she furiously chopped up some carrots to put into a soup, her knife slightly biting into the cutting board. I am not some whore who will sell herself for protection. She had no idea as to why Zabuza-sama had thought this was a good idea. No, she muttered to herself as she scraped the carrots into the pot, I know his reasons. Zabuza-sama had explained that if they could get the blonde on their side then they could petition the Hokage for sanctuary. Haku stirred the soup, listlessly staring into its brown liquid. It's actually not that bad of a plan. Konoha is known for its love of bloodlines, as well as being the strongest of the Big Five. However, Haku frowned as she reached her hand into the neck of her blue kimono and pulled out a necklace. The necklace was on a black cord and attached to it was a silver snowflake embedded with a single diamond in its center. The necklace was the last thing she had from her mother. Ka-san told me to marry for love. Oi, Zabuza, what's this I hear about you being laid out? Was an old bridge builder too much for the scary demon of the mist? A slimy and, unfortunately, familiar voice broke Haku out of her memories. Haku left the kitchen to see that. Gato and his two bodyguards Waraji and Zori had stopped by and were in Zabuza-sama's bedroom. Gato was a short man with shaggy receding white hair that fell down to his back and a thin handlebar mustache of the same color. He preferred to wear dark-colored business suits with a pair of circular black shades. So, demon, Gato said with an eye roll, his voice dripping with derision, what kept you from finishing the job? The old man hit you with his cane. Zabuza laid in his bed. Silent. The sheets pulled up to his neck. Waraji let out a bark of laughter. Yeah, was the old man too much for ya? I always thought that you were compensating for something with that sword of yours. Waraji was a brown-skinned man with an eye patch covering his right eye who sported a goatee and preferred to have his hair up in a topknot. He was shirtless and wore white pants. Shinobi, Zori spat the word, always think they're better than us cause they got that chakra crap. Boss could have paid us half and we would have gotten the job done. Zori was a light-skinned man with bluish-white hair who wore a blue jacket with black pants and a purple beanie. He also had 2 tattoos on his face that went from below the center of each eye to the center of each cheek. Gato nodded. That's right, I could have had my boys here do your job for half the price. So, Gato approached Zabuza's bed, what gives? I paid you good money and here you are lying in bed wasting it. The bridge builder, Zabuza began, hired Shinobi. And, so what? Gato yelled, interrupting Zabuza. What do you care about some random? Zabuza flexed his killing intent, a purple aura gathering around his body. Gato's bodyguards reflexively grabbed the katanas strapped to their waists and took a step back. Gato quickly shut up. Zabuza glared at Gato to keep him quiet. As I was saying, the bridge builder hired Shinobi. One of whom was Hitaki Kakashi. Gato paled. He knew who Kakashi was. When Gato was a more reputable businessman, he had thought about hiring the strongest shinobi from the strongest village to do a mission for him. When he asked the Hokage, the old geezer told him that their best shinobi, Hitaki Kakashi, was very expensive, meaning he was very dangerous. Zabuza continued. Therefore, you'll now be paying triple my rate. What? Gato bellowed, forgetting his fear for a moment as he reached out to pull back Zabuza's bed sheet. That's highway robbery. As Gato's hand was about to grasp the sheet, Haku decided to intervene. She grabbed the minuscule mogul's wrist with enough force to break it and declared in a chilling tone, "You will not touch Zabuza-sama." Gato screamed out in pain. "You bitch." Seeing their boss being attacked spurred the two bodyguards into action. Yet before they could take a single step, Haku had disappeared in a burst of speed and reappeared between the two of them. In her hands were their swords, drawn from their sheaths and resting at their throats. Zori and Waraji had the same thought. Fast, fast. Haku, release them. Zabuza ordered. Haku nodded. Releasing the two bodyguards, she disappeared in another burst of speed and reappeared by Zabuza's bedside. Gato, Zabuza started, making sure that the midget, who was still holding his broken wrist, was paying attention before he continued. When Gato looked up from where he was kneeling on the floor, Zabuza knew he had succeeded. "You'll pay me triple." "Fine," Gato spat, as he threw a glare towards Haku. "Triple. But you'll do it in 2 weeks." Zabuza glanced towards Haku, the unasked question obvious, "Can I be up before that?" Haku gave Zabuza a slight nod. "Agreed, Gato. 2 weeks. Now leave, I've got plans to make." Gato left the hideout with his two bodyguards, a look of apoplectic rage on his face. "I had it handled, Haku." Zabuza moved the sheet to show that he had a kunai in his left hand. "I know, Zabuza-sama." Haku clasped her hands in front of her waist. "Though I didn't want that slime to touch you." Zabuza repressed a sigh. Sometimes Haku's devotion was a bit excessive. "You'll have to get used to it, Haku. Our current way of life will have us dealing with slime like Gato on a daily basis." Haku groaned and face-palmed. Zabuza-sama wasn't as sly as he thought he was. "Fine, Zabuza-sama, I'll think about your plan." "Think about it. And that's all I'll promise you." If Zabuza could, he would have done a little jig. Sadly, his injuries prevented him from doing so. So he settled for a bright grin hidden by his bandages. "That's all I ask, Haku. And who knows, maybe it was destiny that we met the Gaki. Now I want you to head out tomorrow and get the herbs. I feel like I'll need to be at my best soon." "As you wish, Zabuza-sama." Haku bowed. "And Haku, I smell the soup burning." When Naruto had fallen asleep in the forest, the things he had expected to be awoken by included the sun, an animal, his sensei, one of his teammates, or, heaven forbid, some enemy. He never expected to be woken up by an angel. "You'll catch a cold if you sleep out here," a voice as soft as silk said, as Naruto felt a hand gently shake his shoulder. Groaning, Naruto opened his bleary eyes only to be met with warm chocolate brown eyes, residing in a soft face with a button nose and pouty pink lips, all framed by a curtain of black tresses. "Beautiful," Naruto murmured. The angel blushed, as her hand left his shoulder and demurely covered her mouth. "Era," she giggled, "thank you for the compliment, Shinobi-san." She moved her hand and gave Naruto a bright smile. Naruto, realizing that he blurted out his thoughts, scratched the back of his head as he gave her a sheepish grin. "Sorry." Naruto then tilted his head, as his mind caught up with her last comment. "Say, how did you know I was a shinobi?" Naruto asked with the slightest amount of suspicion. The angel slowly reached her hand forward and flicked his hayate, producing a tiny ding as her nail struck the metal. "Is this not your headband, Shinobi-san?" she asked, teasingly. Naruto grumbled as he quickly turned his head to the side to hide his embarrassment. "Baka Naruto," he silently admonished himself. He then turned towards the woman and stated, "And my name's not Shinobi-san, it's Uzumaki Naruto, future Hokage of Konohagakure. He finished his statement with a bright grin. Ah, my apologies, I did not know I was in the presence of someone so great, she said with faux surprise coloring her tone. She bowed her head slightly. My name is Yuki Haku, aspiring doctor. Doctor. Naruto tilted his head, then shivered. I'm not a fan of doctors, too many needles. Haku held up her basket as she suppressed a laugh. Then I hope you like me, I prefer to use herbs in my treatments. Herbs? Naruto trailed off, reminded of something. Ah, his blue eyes widened in realization. I didn't hurt the herbs, did I? He asked, hoping he didn't damage the herbs during his training last night. The last time he had done so, Ino had found out and made her displeasure known. On a dirt road somewhere in the countryside of Hino-kuni, a kunoichi with platinum blonde hair and pupil-less teal eyes, sneezed. It wouldn't have been so bad, if she wasn't eating at an onigiri at the moment, and subsequently sprayed bits of half-chewed rice and snot over her new top. Her scream of rage could be heard for miles around. Haku shook her head. No, Uzumaki-san, you didn't hurt the herbs. In fact, Haku made a show of looking around. They appear to be the only undamaged things in this clearing. Naruto let out a nervous chuckle as he scratched his cheek. Sorry, I guess I might have gone a little overboard with training. Haku made a sound in agreement. She then looked into Naruto's eyes. He has beautiful blue eyes, she thought absently and asked, why are you out here training, Uzumaki-san? You can just call me Naruto. Haku-san. Naruto waved his hand as if brushing away the formalities. As for why I'm training, I want to get stronger. Stronger? But you look so strong and manly already. Haku gushed. Nope. I need to be stronger, a lot stronger than I am. Naruto exclaimed, excitedly. Haku's tone softened as she asked, but why? Why do you seek strength, Naruto-san? Naruto paused, thinking of his answer. If you had asked him a week ago, his answer would have been, so I can be the Hokage. But after their team meeting 2 days ago, his answer has changed. Kakashi's team was currently resting from their confrontation with Zabuza in a room that Tazuna had provided for them at his house. Kakashi was resting on the sole futon in the room, having collapsed from chakra exhaustion shortly after the Oinin had left with Zabuza's body. While each of his genin was doing something to relax, Sakura was brushing her hair, Sasuke was checking his equipment, and Naruto was leaning on the windowsill and staring out to sea. It was his final genin, Naruto, who occupied Kakashi's thoughts as he stared up at the ceiling. Naruto surprised me. I did not expect him to henge into a shuriken and have Sasuke throw him at Zabuza. It was wonderful teamwork. Although, Naruto, come here for a second. Kakashi ordered as he continued to stare up at the ceiling. Naruto broke out of his daydreaming and knelt down by Kakashi's bedside. What is it, Kakashi-sensei? Kakashi gave Naruto his eye smile to put him at ease. Naruto, I want to thank you and Sasuke as well for saving me. Your plan to force Zabuza to release me was ingenious. Naruto bashfully rubbed the back of his head. Gee, thanks, Kakashi-sensei. I just knew I had to do something to save you, Datbeo. It's like you said, those who break the rules are trash, but those who abandon their comrades are worse than trash. Thank you, Naruto. However, Kakashi narrowed his eyes at his student. Why didn't you have a shadow clone transform into a shuriken and have that thrown instead? You realize by having the real you thrown you placed yourself in immediate danger. Naruto started to sweat. Yeah, I guess I didn't really think that far ahead. No, Kakashi sighed, you didn't think that far ahead, but that's a reflection on me, your teacher, rather than on you. The Oinin made it clear when he mentioned water walking, that I have been neglectful as your sensei. To all of you. Sakura perked up. Water walking? She asked, as she placed her brush in her bag and walked over to kneel on the other side of Kakashi's bed. What did the Oinin mean by water walking? And what is an Oinin anyway? To answer your first question, Water walking is a chakra control exercise that teaches a shinobi how to channel chakra through their feet to stand on water. It's how Zabuza and I were fighting on the lake. Kakashi explained. And why haven't you taught us that yet? Sasuke interjected, as he plopped himself down next to Sakura, sitting cross-legged. Kakashi mentally sighed, as he prepared himself for the eventual explosion from his students, because of yet to teach you tree walking. Tree walking? Sakura's eyes narrowed in thought. Is this something that the other genin squads have already been taught? She asked with an accusing tone. Kakashi winced. Damn, sometimes I forget how smart Sakura is, maybe. He squeaked out. Kakashi-sensei. Sakura erupted. Just what are we supposed to know by now? A lot more than you currently do, Kakashi told her as he tried to burrow himself into his pillow to escape his female student's wrath. And that blame lies solely with me, Kakashi admitted as he looked towards his students, and for that I apologize. I was hoping that you three would approach me with questions on how to improve, but I've realized as I've been laying here that you three probably didn't even know what you had to improve on. And what do we have to improve on? Sasuke asked with his chin resting on his threaded fingers. A lot, though the most pressing thing is chakra control. It'll help improve Sakura's reserves, as well as ensuring that you and Naruto don't waste nearly as much chakra on your jutsus. Kakashi explained. So, we'll start with tree climbing tomorrow. We need to do this because you never know when we'll run into another shinobi like Zabuza. Hell, I wouldn't put it past Gato to hire another nin. Would he really do that, Kakashi-sensei? I mean Zabuza had to have cost him a pretty penny to hire, wouldn't that have set him back? Sakura asked, sounding a bit fearful of potentially facing someone like Zabuza again. Kakashi didn't want to worry his genin, but as they say, forewarned is forearmed, so he soldiered on. The fact that he hired someone like Zabuza means that his operations here in Nami no Kuni are lucrative. Very lucrative. Meaning, he's very likely to hire another shinobi of Zabuza's caliber to protect those operations. Sakura paled. Naruto gulped and Sasuke clenched his fists so hard his knuckles popped. We were lucky, Kakashi continued. If Zabuza had had an accomplice, who knows what would have happened. The irony of this statement would not be lost on Kakashi in the near future. Naruto, Sakura, Sasuke, Kakashi addressed them, making sure to look each genin in the eye as he said their names. I promised you that I would never let my comrades die, and I meant it then and I mean it now. However, I can't guarantee that I'll always be there to protect you or, Kakashi gave a self-deprecating chuckle, that you might not have to save me. That's why we need to get stronger. All of us. So that we can protect each other. You bet, Kakashi-sensei. Naruto grinned. Let's get stronger together. Sakura cheered, while internally she was thinking, Cha, I'll be stronger than you yet, Ino Buddha. Then Sasuke-kun will be all mine. Sasuke smirked. Alright, Kakashi said, we'll start tree walking tomorrow. Any questions? Wait. You never answered my question about what an oinen was. Sakura pointed out. Ah, Kakashi's sweat dropped. Sorry, I forgot about that. He turned to his orange-garbed student. Really need to get him some darker clothes. How he outran and hid from Anbu in that monstrosity is beyond me. Would you care to field this one, Naruto? Sure. Naruto chirped. It was rare that he actually got to show off his knowledge. Naruto turned towards Sakura. An oinen is a ninja who's responsible for hunting down their village's missing nin and disposing of their bodies. They do it so that enemy villages can't learn secrets from their bodies or take anything from them. Konoha has some oinen as well. They serve as part of Anbu. Wow. Sakura gasped. I didn't know that happened. And I didn't know you were so knowledgeable, Naruto, she said, sounding impressed. Hehe. When you hang around Hokage Gigi as much as I do, you learn some things. Naruto said as he placed his hands behind his head. Sakura shook her head, as if to ward off an impending headache. Naruto, stop referring to Hokage-sama so disrespectfully. But Sakura-chan, Naruto moaned weakly, having had this conversation before and knowing where it's gonna go. Hokage Gigi likes it when I call him that. I don't care. It's disrespectful, so you shouldn't do it. Sakura huffed, as she crossed her arms. Sakura-chan. Naruto hung his head. Although, another question popped into her head as she mentally ran through Kakashi and Naruto's conversation with the Oinin. I recall you saying that it was a rule for Oinin to dispose of bodies where they dropped. Why didn't he? Ah, Kakashi let out a nervous chuckle. I may have implied that I wanted to take Zabuza's blade for Konoha. Sasuke scoffed. That hunk of metal. Don't laugh, Sasuke. That hunk of metal is worth enough to buy you a small town. Kakashi laughed as he saw Sakura and Naruto bolt upright. Really, really? They yelled simultaneously. Kakashi nodded. Yes, really. Zabuza's blade, the Kubikiribocho, is one of 7 special blades that is passed down to the best 7 sword wielders of Kurigakure no Sato. Each blade has a special ability associated with it, and when all 7 swordsmen are on the battlefield with their blades, they are said to be capable of bringing down an entire nation. Wow, wow. Naruto and Sakura were amazed. Even Sasuke was impressed, going by the slight widening of his eyes. Nay, Kakashi-sensei, Sakura began wringing her hands, we don't have to worry about another swordsman showing up, do we? Kakashi allayed her fears. It's highly unlikely, Sakura. From our intel 6 of the 7 are either dead or missing nin. There is one who remains loyal to the Mizukage, but with Kiri's civil war one doubt he would be leaving his cage's side anytime soon. Sakura breathed a sigh of relief. That's good. Naruto nodded his head in agreement and Sasuke slightly relaxed. That's enough talk. We've got an early morning tomorrow, so let's get some rest. Kakashi dismissed them. A snap of fingers broke Naruto out of his thoughts. Are you okay, Naruto-san? Haku asked him as she withdrew her hand. Ah, sorry. Naruto gave her an apologetic grin. I guess I was just lost in thought. To answer your question, I want to get stronger to protect my sensei and teammates. There, Naruto paused as he searched for the right words, precious to me. Haku's eyes shone brightly at his answer, and for some unknown reason, Naruto felt like he had just passed some sort of test. That's a good reason to get stronger. In fact, I think that the only way for a person to be truly strong is when they are protecting someone precious to them. Haku explained as she gave Naruto a smile that made his heart do backflips. I agree, Haku-chan. Naruto exclaimed. Haku blushed at the affectionate suffix. Then she threw Naruto a sly grin. Haku-chan. My Naruto-kun, Haku teased as she drew out the kun suffix. How forward of you. Naruto yelped, his face turning cherry red, as he frantically waved his arms up and down. No. I mean you are pretty beautiful. But I didn't mean, but I wouldn't mind getting close to you, I mean getting to know you. I mean, all shut up now. Naruto trailed off as he stared at the dirt, wondering if the earth would be kind enough to swallow him at that moment. Haku giggled. Poor boy, she thought, he blushes any harder and he might faint. Somewhere in Konohagakure no Sato, a blue-haired kunoichi with pale lavender eyes, sneezed, during a meeting between her father and sister. Are you okay, Nei-chan? A girl with long brown hair and similar eyes asked. I'm okay, Imouto, the blue-haired kunoichi assured her with a smile. Their father, who had long brown hair and pale eyes as well, let out a small cough to get their attention. Hinata, Hanabi, let us continue. Yes, To-sama, they both replied. It's all right, Naruto-kun, Haku assured him, placing emphasis on the suffix. I was just surprised. Haku stood up and offered the boy a hand. Now would this kind gentleman assist this humble doctor with her tasks? Naruto took her hand and stood up. You bet, Dadbeo. Dadbeo. Haku asked as she covered her mouth to suppress her giggles. Naruto just groaned as he facepalmed. Unknown to either of them, a raven-haired genin was leaning against a tree and listening to the conversation. The Dobi has got himself a girlfriend. Sasuke smirked as he put his hands in his pockets and left to report to Kakashi. Wonder what the scarecrow will think of this. Scene change. Elsewhere on the island, Gato was sitting in his office smoking a cigar with his left hand. That bitch, he glared down at his broken right wrist that was in a sling. She dares to harm me. Gato, I am the biggest businessman this side of the elemental nations. Gato was broken out of his fumings when his assistant entered his office. Gato-sama, we've got a message from our contact in Kirigakure no Sato. And, Gato growled, as he glared at his assistant over his shades. The message in his eyes was clear: if I don't like this, I'll be needing a new assistant. Gato's assistant gulped. Our contact has informed us that the Mizukage is interested in our offer, and he will be sending his agent in the next 10 days. Wonderful. Gato took a long drag of his cigar, held the smoke in his mouth for a second, and slowly exhaled. That's the best news I've gotten all day. Gato tapped his cigar into his crystal ashtray. You're dismissed. Gato's assistant scurried out of the room. Gato swiveled in his chair and looked out his window and towards the warehouse floor. He watched for a while as his men were busy packaging his product, the sight never failing to bring a grin to his face. Soon, I'll be expanding into Mizu no Kuni. Gato looked at his broken wrist and chuckled, and the bitch will get what's coming to her. Who says you can't mix business with pleasure? Scene change. Haku was humming a pleasant tune, as she entered their hideout, lightly swinging her basket full of herbs that Naruto had helped her pick. The basket was filled to bursting. Haku let out a chuckle, remembering Naruto's eagerness to help her with her task. So eager was he that she had to stop him from picking the clearing clean. He apologized and gave her his signature grin that stretched out his whisker marks and narrowed his eyes into slits, making him look like a smiling fox. Someone sounds happy. Did something good happen? Zabuza asked, breaking Haku out of her thoughts. Oh, I was just thinking about my time spent with Naruto-kun, Haku responded, not noticing her slip up as she placed her basket on the kitchen counter and grabbed her apron. I might as well get lunch started before I start grinding herbs, she thought. Naruto-kun, Zabuza parroted, confused. The blonde Gaki. When did you meet the Gaki? Wait, why are you calling him kun? If the brat touched you, I'll kill him. Zabuza roared, a surge of overprotectiveness overcoming him. Zabuza-sama. Haku gasped, her hand going to her chest to calm her racing heart. She had not expected that outburst. Then Zabuza's words registered in her mind, and her eye twitched. If the brat touched you, I'll kill him. Oh Zabuza-sama, Haku said in a sweet tone of voice as she approached his bedside, unconsciously charging Hyoten chakra to her right hand. Zabuza gulped as phantom pains ran through his cheek. I know that tone of voice, Zabuza thought frantically. It's the same tone she used when Zabuza's thoughts were cut short by a familiar pain. It's your plan, Zabuza no Baka. Haku yelled. For the second time in 3 days, a resounding slap echoed throughout the forest and sent birds fleeing from their nests into the skies. So, you met the Gaki? Zabuza asked after he had regained consciousness and Haku had given him his first dose of medicine. He repressed a shudder at the bitter taste as he reached for a glass of water to wash the taste down. Yes, she said as she sat in a chair by his bedside. I happened to meet him in the forest near the herbs I needed to get. He had exhausted himself training. Oh, Zabuza raised his glass to his lips, and what was the Gaki training in? Haku slyly smiled as she watched Zabuza take a drink. Nothing much, just tree walking. A spray of water escaped Zabuza's lips as he sputtered, what? I was outsmarted by a genin who couldn't even tree walk. Yes, Haku nodded as she tried, and failed, to keep the laughter out of her voice. Quite an accomplishment for my Naruto-kun. Zabuza slumped in his bed, a dark miasma surrounding him as he repeatedly muttered, he couldn't even tree walk. He couldn't even tree walk. He did this for a few seconds until Haku's comment registered. Wait. Zabuza sat up and looked towards Haku with hope shining in his eyes. My Naruto-kun. Does this mean that you'll carry out the plan? Haku blushed and looked away. Well, it's too soon to tell. But when we parted ways, we agreed to meet up again tomorrow. That's great. Zabuza cheered. Soon we'll be Konoha shinobi and won't have to look over our shoulders anymore. Zabuza-sama. Haku whined as she waved her arms. I never said that I agreed. Plus, we don't even know if Naruto-kun will agree. Zabuza brushed off her comment with a wave of his hand. Meh, I've got a feeling that it will all work out. It's like it's destined, or something. Haku's eyes widened. Zabuza-sama, are you clairvoyant? What? Zabuza asked, confused. Scene change. I'm back, Naruto announced as he entered Tazuna's house with a bounce in his step. He saw that his team was eating breakfast at the dining table with the client's family. Kakashi, sitting at the head of the table with a good view of the front door, threw Naruto a lazy wave, his face buried in his precious Ika Ika. Yo, Naruto, get some training done this morning? Kakashi asked, a hint of mirth in his voice. Yes, sensei, I did. I took your advice and used my Kage Bunshin, shadow clones, to help speed up my training, Naruto replied as he pulled out a chair and sat down next to Tsunami. Tsunami, Tazuna's daughter, was a woman with long blue hair wearing a short-sleeved pink shirt and a long blue skirt. She stood up. Let me get you breakfast, Naruto-kun. Tsunami gave Naruto a motherly smile before she went to the kitchen to get him a plate. Sakura giggled. Yeah, Naruto, how was training this morning? She asked, putting stress on the word, training. Sasuke raised his bowl of rice to his face to hide his smirk. It went fine, Naruto stated slowly. For some reason his prankster senses were tingling, and not in a good way. The last time he felt like this was when Anko-chan had gotten him back for messing with her dango. Naruto shivered at the memory. Deep in the bowels of Konohagakure's torture and interrogation building, a kunoichi with light purple hair and pupilless brown eyes, sneezed, right into a prisoner's face. Ah, is the big, mean torturer coming down with a cold? The prisoner mocked. The kunoichi narrowed her eyes, then she gave the prisoner a devilish grin as she went to her instrument table and grabbed a bottle of chili powder, and a funnel. Sneezing and screams were heard soon after. Naruto continued. I made good progress. I'll probably be at the top of the tree in a few days. That's great. Maybe you and Sasuke will catch up to me soon. Sakura teased as she held up her arm and flexed her bicep. Sasuke and Naruto rolled their eyes good-naturedly. Tsunami returned and placed a bowl of rice and a plate of grilled fish in front of Naruto. Here you go, enjoy. Thanks, Tsunami-san, Naruto said as he picked up his chopsticks. Itadakimasu. Naruto took his first bite of rice and moaned in delight. This is as good as Ayame-chan's cooking. In a small ramen stand, a young woman with long brown hair and black eyes, sneezed. Are you okay, Ayame? An older man with graying black hair and small black eyes, asked as he was wiping down the counter. I'm fine, Tsu-san, she assured him as she tied on her bandana. Maybe someone is thinking about me. Our number one customer, perhaps. The old man teased. Ayame's face flushed red. Tsu-san. Naruto took a bite of his fish and was savoring it when Kakashi let out a perverted giggle. Oh Haruto, you naughty boy, seducing a doctor in a forest. Wah what? Naruto coughed out, pounding his chest as he tried to dislodge the fish caught in his throat. Tsunami smacked him on the back, helping him clear his airway and sending a glob of half-chewed fish flying from Naruto's mouth and onto the table with a wet splat. Ew! Sakura and Inari let out at the same time. Naruto's head whipped towards Kakashi. What did you say? Oh, nothing. I'm just enjoying this story about a ninja and a doctor meeting in a forest, Kakashi said with feigned casualness. Kakashi peered over the edge of his book and locked eyes with his blonde genin, enjoying how he began to squirm in his seat. Have you heard it before? Kakashi asked, innocently. Naruto gulped. Scene change. In a darkened office, a man stood in front of his windows and watched a mass of dark clouds creep their way over the mountains. When he was younger, the beast inside of him would stir when a storm approached. But for the last few years, ever since the purges had started, the beast had been silent. Chillingly silent. If someone were to take a close look at the man's pink eyes at that moment, they would see his eyes flash red with tri-bladed shuriken for pupils overtaking his usual eye color. Mizukage-sama, a shinobi, entered the office, knelt down in front of a desk and addressed the man. Yes, the Mizukage asked, as he continued to watch the coming storm, his eyes returning to their pupilless pink. We've made contact with the businessman. He agrees to your terms. The shinobi reported. A slight smile crept its way onto the Mizukage's face as thunder rumbled in the distance. Excellent. You are dismissed. Yes, sir. The shinobi left the office in the swirl of a shushin body flicker. 10 days. The Mizukage stated to the darkened room. You have 10 days to recover Kubikiribocho. Do not disappoint me. There was no response. In fact, the only sound in the room was the spattering of rain hitting the windows, then lightning cracked like a whip and in a flash of blue the room was illuminated, revealing a tall man with shaggy blonde hair wearing a white anbu mask with green triangle painted on its lower half, slits for eye holes and Kurigakure's symbol etched onto the forehead. When the light faded, the sound of spattering rain was drowned out by laughter tinged with madness. Haku stood in the clearing where she had met Naruto yesterday, a picnic basket by her feet, as she looked up into the canopy and admired how the sunlight filtered through the leaves, waiting for Naruto to arrive for their date. Though neither of them had called it a date, she certainly wouldn't mind if Naruto thought of it as such. That's why she decided to put on some makeup this morning, a little lip gloss to draw attention to her lips, as well as some light eyeshadow and some mascara to make her eyes pop. Her makeup was subtle, just as her one-time sensei had taught her. Subtlety is the key when it comes to applying makeup, Hisame told her, as she applied some eyeshadow around Haku's eyes. Zabuza had cashed in a favor from Hisame, a missing nin from a megakure, to teach his charge about the more feminine aspects of life. Hisame placed the eyeshadow down on the table, grabbed the lip gloss and continued her lesson. Just like the shinobi arts. If your enemy does not expect it, how can they prepare for it? Though most shinobi, Hisame snorted as she rolled her eyes, prefer to learn jutsu that can level battlefields, forgetting that we kunoichi have killed our fair share with only a smile and a blade from our obi. Hisame finished applying the makeup, walked around Haku's chair, stood behind her and rested her head on Haku's shoulder as they both gazed into the mirror. It's why women are considered one of the 3 vices for shinobi, we know subtly. But Zabuza-sama is a master of silent killing. That's subtle. Haku protested with a pout. Hisame bussed Haku's cheek. I know, sweetie, and that's why I accepted helping him. Now let's see about getting you a new kimono, on Zabu-kun's ryo of course. A slight rustle in the trees off to Haku's left drew her attention. A squirrel had appeared on a branch, observing her. At first, she thought nothing of it. Be a ninja long enough and animals stopping to see what you're doing becomes commonplace. They'll watch for a few seconds, and when they see that you're not a threat they'll leave and continue doing whatever it is animals do, hunt, forage, mate. The only animals that don't immediately leave are predators defending their territory, and a squirrel certainly didn't qualify as a predator. Unless you were a nut that is. Haku held the squirrel's gaze, her chocolate brown eyes boring into its beady black ones. The squirrel didn't react, at first. But as the seconds passed by, and as Haku continued to stare at it, unblinkingly, the squirrel started to fidget. After a few more seconds the squirrel gave Haku what she swore was a nervous grin as it placed its paw on the back of its head and scratched it. Haku's eyes widened, as the name, Naruto-kun, left her lips. The squirrel let out a startled squeak as it dashed from its branch, scrambled up the tree trunk and disappeared into the foliage. You called, Haku-chan. A familiar voice asked from behind her. Haku spun around, her hand going towards her obi, when she saw a spiky mop of bright blonde hair and blue eyes that were shining with amusement. Naruto-kun, she gasped, clutching her chest, her heart and mind racing. Just how skilled is he with the Henge no Jutsu transformation technique? Or stealth for that matter? She wondered as she got her breathing under control. Are you okay, Haku-chan? Naruto asked, sounding worried. He hoped he didn't startle her too badly. The last thing he wanted was to make Haku dislike him. Naruto watched nervously, as she took a deep breath and then flashed him a smile, but the smile didn't put him at ease. In fact, it did quite the opposite. Haku's smile was one that made her eyes smolder and set a fire in Naruto's belly. Naruto stood stock still, entranced, as Haku approached him, a slight sway to her hips. He didn't even register how close she was until she had cupped his face with her cool hands, her thumbs lightly rubbing his whisker marks. Naruto-kun, Haku cooed, her breath ghosting over his face, smelling of mint. You're not gonna sneak up on me again, are you? It took a few seconds for Naruto's mind to process the sounds coming from her mouth, and a few seconds more to translate them into words. Then his mind had to formulate a response, which was rather difficult given her current ministrations. But with a sage-worthy effort he was finally able to stutter out, I'll try not to, Haku-chan. Haku faked a pout as she continued to rub his whisker marks. She was surprised to find that they were actual whiskers, and they were rather soft to the touch. I suppose that's the best I can expect, from a ninja. Haku sighed as she released Naruto, suppressing a giggle as she watched Naruto lean forward to maintain their connection. Haku then took in Naruto's appearance, and noted a glaring omission. Naruto-kun, where's your jumpsuit? Ah, Naruto looked down at his new attire, a navy button-up shirt, a pair of black pants and his blue sandals. He also wasn't wearing his headband, which wouldn't be so bad if it wasn't the thing he used to keep his unruly bangs out of his eyes. That's a funny story. So, Naruto-kun, what have we learned about lying to your sensei? Kakashi asked as he leaned against a tree, reading his smut, and basking in the punishment his genin was undergoing. It was a punishment Kakashi was familiar with, having undergone it himself with Obito under Minato-sensei. In fact, one could call it a tradition, for Minato had experienced it under Jiraiya, while Jiraiya had experienced it under the Sandaime and the Sandaime had experienced it under the Shadaime. The punishment was simple, so simple in fact it could be broken down into 2 steps. Step 1. Take a coil of handy-dandy rope, loop said rope around your genin's wrists and fingers so they can't form hand seals, then tie the rest of the rope to a branch high above your genin, making sure that they can still place their feet flatly on the trunk of the tree, then hoist them up like a piñata. Don't forget to leave enough room so that their toes are barely brushing the ground. Then, with your genin adequately strung up, you tell them that their punishment ends when they tree walk up to the branch. Simple enough. Then comes step 2. And step 2 varies depending on the sensei. The Shadaime, being a Mokuden user, would preferred to use wooden spikes for step 2. The Sandaime believed nothing lit a fire under a disorderly genin like a fire jutsu, while Minato-sensei thought kunai was a great way to get the point across. Kakashi, well, he took a page out of Jiraiya's playbook and enlisted some help from his summons. Call off your dog, sensei. Naruto yelled as he ran up the tree to get away from the biting jaws of Kakashi's ninkin. He made it halfway to the branch when his concentration slipped and he fell towards the bottom of the tree, and to the dog below. That's a shame. Kakashi turned the page of his book. You were halfway there too. Yoch. Naruto let out when he felt the small pug dog, Pakun, bite into his ankle and tear a strip of his pants off. Hey. These are my only pair of pants. Pakun spat out the fabric. And I'm doing the world a favor by getting rid of such an obnoxious eyesore, brat. Eyesore. Orange is awesome, Datbeo. Naruto yelled as he flailed about, trying to kick the tiny dog, who nimbly avoided his strikes. Plus, what would you know, you ugly pug? Ugly. Pakun's left eye twitched. I'll show you ugly. Bull. Pakun barked towards the largest of Kakashi's ninkin, a bulldog, who was laying down in the shade on the sidelines. Get in here. Naruto paled as he saw the large dog that was twice his size approach, drool dripping from his jaws. Oh no. Oh. No no no. Naruto's feet were slipping and scrambling at the trunk, trying to stick to it with chakra, but to no avail as the beast drew closer. Naruto could feel its fetid breath on his backside. A loud crunch was heard, followed by a scream of pain that rocked the whole forest. Soon after, Naruto completed his punishment, and had mastered tree walking in the process. All it cost him was his pride, and the seat of his pants. Haku had tears streaming down her face as she was doubled over, laughing. So your sensei's ninkin, they ripped up your pants? Haku was able to get out through her laughter. Yeah, Naruto chuckled good-naturedly. Looking back on it, he could see he was wrong not to tell his sensei what he had done yesterday morning. Thankfully our client's daughter, Tsunami, is a seamstress in her spare time, so she had some clothes she'd made lying around. Haku's laughter died down into chuckles, and soon into giggles. How fortunate for you, Naruto-kun. Though I must say she chose rather well, those clothes look very good on you. The shirt really brings out your eyes. Naruto grinned. Thanks for the compliment, Haku-chan. Naruto then squinted his eyes as he looked at her. I don't know what you did, but you look even prettier today, Haku-chan. Haku blushed as she brushed a loose bang behind her ear. Thank you. She then lifted the picnic basket. Are you ready to eat now? Naruto's growling stomach answered the question for him. Haku laughed and Naruto soon joined her. A breeze passed through the clearing carrying the pair's laughter and tousling the hair of a shadow clone of a certain Konoha-jonin, who was hiding up on a branch, notepad in hand, furiously scribbling notes. Jiraiya-sama would be so proud right now, the Kakashi clone thought. Scene change. In Yugakure no Sato, an older man with waist-length white hair, wearing a green short kimono with matching pants under which he wore mesh armor. He also wore handguards, a black belt, red Geta sandals and a red haori with 2 yellow circles on each side. He also carried with him a large scroll that rested on the small of his back. Currently, the older man was sitting on a branch, a telescope in his left hand, a pen in his right and a notebook on his lap. He was gathering inspiration for his latest volume of Ika Ika by researching at one of Kuni's numerous hot springs. His latest subjects of research had just entered the bath. 4 young women, 2 blondes, a redhead and 1 with light gray hair. The 2 blondes were light-skinned while the redhead and grayhead were darker-skinned, meaning those 2 most likely hailed from Kaminari no Kuni. All 4 were wearing towels, though he could tell by the way the towels clung to their forms that everyone but the redhead had tremendous assets. Come on girls, don't be shy, the man muttered under his breath as a perverted chuckle escaped his lips. Show Jiraiya-sama what you're working with. Jiraiya leaned forward, his left eye fused to the end of his telescope as he watched the women enter the bath and begin to shed their towels. Yes, yes. His pen was a blur of motion, he was writing so fast it was doubtful if even the Sharingan could keep up with it. Just as the blonde with the bob cut was about to bear all, a breeze brushed past Jiraiya's nose and caused him to freeze. His telescope falling from numb fingers. The world has changed, he stated with wide eyes as he shot up to his feet and turned towards the breeze, unaware that his sudden motion alerted the women below him to his presence. Women who happened to be Kunoichi. Jiraiya took a deep whiff. I smell it in the air. He closed his eyes, and reached out to his greatest source of power. I feel it in the perv. When Jiraiya opened his coal eyes they were burning with a determination hotter than the sun. Pointing into the breeze he roared to the heavens, somewhere a great story has just begun. So focused was he on this divine revelation that he nearly did not notice the blue, rodent-shaped fireball and 3 lightning balls flying towards his face. Instinctively, he replaced himself with a Kage Bunshin shadow clone. He always had one on standby in case of emergencies. Then he proceeded to let out howls of pain and anguish, so as to appease his attackers. Then he waited to see if they would follow up. Thankfully, after a few minutes, nothing happened, but just to be sure, he jumped into a separate tree to check the bath. It was empty. Jiraiya pouted, a rather unbecoming look on the man. They're gone. And I was so close too. Just a little more and I would have seen everything. Jiraiya had what could only be described as a lecherous grin on his face. A polite cough broke Jiraiya out of his debauched imaginations. Jiraiya turned around to see a snow monkey with gray fur crouched behind him. The monkey wore a black gi with the Konoha leaf stitched onto its chest in silver. It held a scroll in its paw. The monkey held out the scroll. Jiraiya-sama, a message from Sandaime-sama. Oh, and what does the old monkey want now, Itsuki? Jiraiya asked as he took the scroll and checked it for the usual security seal. It was a seal that was attuned to his blood and chakra, meaning that only Jiraiya could open the scroll. If anyone else tried, the results would be explosive. Finding it, Jiraiya bit his thumb and smeared the bloody digit on the seal as he channeled chakra. The seal glowed white and then faded from the paper. I do not know what Sandaime-sama wants, I am just a messenger. Itsuki replied in a no-nonsense tone. If that is all, Itsuki asked, arms folded onto his chest. Jiraiya waved him off, his eyes consuming the scroll. You're dismissed. Tell sensei I'll have more information after I speak with my contact. Itsuki disappeared in a white puff of smoke as Jiraiya finished the message. So sensei wants to know more about the bloodline purges in Kiri. Jiraiya muttered under his breath as he tried to puzzle out Kurofesa's motivation. What's the play, sensei? Alliance? Jiraiya snorted at the thought. I don't see sensei allying with Yagura after he systematically began slaughtering his own people. The rebels? Maybe. Jiraiya trailed off as he rubbed his chin. The rebels. The bloodline. Rebels. Recruitment. Konoha did lose a major bloodline with the loss of the Uchiha. Jiraiya shook his head. It doesn't matter. Sensei will tell me when I've got the info for him. Jiraiya threw the scroll into the air and destroyed it with a small Gokaku no Jutsu, Grand Fireball Jutsu. Jiraiya watched the ashes of the scroll be scattered by the wind. Off to see Kato, in Nami no Kuni. Scene change. So why did you become a shinobi, if you don't mind my asking? Haku asked before she took a bite of some of the onigiri she made. It was quite good if the sounds Naruto were making were any indication. Naruto swallowed his food before he spoke. Ayame-chan had pounded into him the importance of table manners. She has the dented ladle to prove it. I became a shinobi because my Jiji is the Hokage and I wanted to be like him. Haku feigned shock. Your grandfather is Hokage? Naruto chuckled. No, he's not my actual grandfather. He's just taken care of me for as long as I can remember, so I call him Jiji. And what about your parents? Haku asked, though she soon came to regret it as she saw his bright blue eyes dim and his shoulders slump. I never knew my parents. I'm an orphan, Naruto stated sadly. I'm sorry, Naruto-kun, if I had. Haku began to apologize, but was cut off. It's okay, Haku-chan, Naruto reassured her with a soft smile. You didn't know. Plus, Jiji told me that my parents were great ninja, heroes who gave their lives to protect the village. Is that why you want to be Hokage, to protect the village your parents protected? Haku asked softly. That and also, Naruto unconsciously placed his right hand on his stomach. I'm not exactly well liked in my village, though that is probably putting it lightly. So I want to be Hokage, because being Hokage means I would have gained everyone's respect, and they will stop looking down on me. Naruto then locked eyes with Haku, his blue orbs boring deep into her brown ones, shining with a pain that Haku knew all too well. I don't want to be hated, are what his eyes said, and it was a message that resonated with Haku's very soul. Naruto-kun, Haku began slowly, I know how you feel. I wasn't well liked by my village either. Haku chuckled mirthlessly. In fact, I was despised by my village. All for something I couldn't control. Haku reached into her kimono and pulled out her necklace, and showed it to Naruto. This is the only thing I have left from my mother. Naruto gulped. Did they? Naruto stopped. The unasked question hanging in the air. Yet both knew what he was going to ask. Yes. Haku nodded. Unbidden, tears began to stream down her face as memories of the day she lost her mother flashed through her mind. She remembered her mother and father arguing, the mob of villagers gathered outside her house, yelling things like, ice whore, mutant, freak and demon, a sound of shattered glass, her mother screaming and then blood, lots of blood, her mother's blood, from her mother's body lying on the floor, cold, dead. Haku wanted to be hugged. To feel her mother's warm arms around her like she was feeling right now. Wait. Haku looked up to see that she was currently in Naruto's arms, her face buried into his chest. Haku's face burned scarlet. I'm sorry, Haku-chan, Naruto murmured into her ear as he gently stroked her hair and held her. Haku tried to open her mouth to say something, but nothing came out. Her mind was fried. This was the first time she had ever been held by a boy, and it was after he had seen her cry. Does he think I'm weird? Is my makeup running? I didn't want to cry in front of him. He feels warm. Eventually, Haku just decided to go with it and snuggle into Naruto's embrace, basking in the comfort he provided. Neither could tell you how long they held one another, but both would have agreed it didn't last nearly enough. Reluctantly, Haku was the first to move. As she rubbed her eyes on the back of her hand, they came away black with makeup. I'm sorry, Naruto-kun, I don't know what came over me. Haku reached into the picnic basket, pulled out a canteen of water and a napkin, and started to wipe her eyes. It's okay, Haku-chan, Naruto reassured her. Sometimes when you need to cry, you need to cry. Still, it was embarrassing. Haku stated as she balled up the napkin and placed it in the picnic basket. It wouldn't do to litter now, would it? She then turned towards Naruto and asked with a bright smile, how do I look? Naruto drank in Haku, her cheeks slightly flushed, a black smudge of mascara was still on her left cheek, her eyes were puffy from crying, and her hair had a few strands out of place from being held against his chest. Beautiful, Haku-chan, Naruto replied, as if he was stating a self-evident truth. The sun rises in the east, the planet is round and Haku is beautiful. Haku flushed. Then a glint of determination entered her chocolate brown eyes as she leaned forward and placed a kiss on Naruto's right cheek, dangerously close to the corner of his mouth. Thank you, Naruto-kun, she whispered against his cheek, her breath sending pleasant tingles up and down Naruto's spine. Scene change. When Naruto returned to Tazuna's house, he was in a daze, his eyes were glazed and he had a silly grin on his face. He sat down at the dining room table and simply stared at the wall, not noticing Tazuna sitting at the head of the table overlooking his blueprints. Tazuna looked up from his blueprints, saw the look on Naruto's face, then returned to perusing his blueprints with an amused chuckle. Ah, young love. Tsunami exited the kitchen, wiping her hands off on a towel and saw Naruto staring at the wall with the same look. She giggled into her hand and asked, how did your date go, Naruto-kun? Naruto's widening grin was his only response. Tsunami rolled her eyes good-naturedly. Dinner will be ready soon. Could you please go inform your sensei and teammates? They went out training and, Tsunami was cut off by the door opening and the people in question entering the house. Speak of the devils, she shook her head, turned on her heel and returned to the kitchen, yelling over her shoulder, dinner will be ready soon, so wash up. Hey, Naruto, Sakura greeted her blonde teammate, and then she remembered where he went earlier in the day, and judging by the grin on Naruto's face it went rather well. A Cheshire grin crept its way onto Sakura's face as she sensed an opportunity to do something she hasn't done in the past couple of months, gossip. Just as she was about to pounce on the unsuspecting blonde, and interrogate him for every minute detail from his date, Kakashi placed his hand on her shoulder and lightly squeezed it. Kakashi-sensei, she asked with a confused look on her face. Kakashi shook his head. Let him bask, Sakura. Kakashi looked towards his current favorite student. On his first mission out of the village, the blonde had already scored a date with a beauty, and had gotten a kiss from her as well. Kakashi had never felt prouder as a sensei. And as Kakashi patted his hip pouch where he stored his precious Ika Ika and his new precious notepad that his shadow clone had given him, he had a feeling that Naruto would be a great source of inspiration going forward. You can grill Naruto during dinner. Sakura pouted as she gave a reluctant nod and went up the stairs to go wash up for dinner. Kakashi looked fondly at his student. Minato-sensei would be so proud. Scene change. Zabuza awoke to the smell of chicken being grilled. He kept his eyes closed and maintained his breathing pattern to make it appear as if he was still asleep, an old habit that he had developed while in Kiri's Anbu. He then strained his ears to pick up any unfamiliar sounds. Usually he would channel chakra to his ears to help him do so, but with the medicine that Haku had him on, he wouldn't dare risk it, because he would explode the chakra pathways in his ears. With that cheerful thought, Zabuza focused on his hearing and found what he expected, the sizzling sound of grilling chicken, the gentle hum Haku would do while cooking, and the creaks and groans of the wooden floorboards of their hideout. Satisfied, Zabuza opened his eyes and called for Haku. Haku entered the room with a skip to her step and a glow about her that seemed to chase away the evening gloom. Yes, Zabuza-sama, she chirped as she sat in the chair by his bedside. Someone is happy, Zabuza observed. Did something good happen? Haku's eyes shone as she simply nodded in response. And? Zabuza asked eagerly, hoping beyond hope that her current mood meant that his plan was about to be put in motion. He could already see it now. Him, Haku and the Gaki strolling into the Hokage's office and the old geezer offering them sanctuary. I'll go through with it, Zabuza-sama, I'll make Naruto-kun mine, Haku said with fierce determination. Off the coast of Nami no Kuni, a bridge was awash in a maelstrom of blonde shadow clones. All of them being directed by the self-described master bridge builder, Tazuna. Run that wood over there. Tazuna pointed at a group of 6 clones carrying stacks of lumber, directing the clones with a flick of his thumb towards the end of the bridge leading towards Hai no Kuni. Bring Takeshi some nails, he hollered at a clone standing near the supply tent. Walk underneath the bridge and check for faults. 10 clones standing near the railings quickly hopped over, stuck their feet to the side and started doing just that. Don't you dare write your name in that cement. Tazuna barked at a clone who had his finger hovering above some drying cement. The clone gave the old man a sheepish grin in response and then walked off to help his clone brothers with the other odd jobs Tazuna had them doing. Tazuna wiped the sweat off his brow with the towel he kept around his neck as he looked up into the clear blue sky and towards the sun. Almost noon, we'll break for lunch in another hour. Tazuna looked over his shoulder to see his guard for the past few days, and the source of his increased manpower. You hear that, brat? We'll break in an hour. You can start dispelling your clones in the next 10 minutes. I heard you, old man. Naruto waved him off as he kept his eyes trained on the Nami end of the bridge, scanning for long black tresses in a bright pink kimono that never failed to get his heart pumping. Tazuna, seeing where the boy's attention was, chuckled. You know, I thought a guard is supposed to be searching for threats, not their girlfriend. Naruto sputtered, his face turning red, as he turned to yell at the old man, Haku-chan's not my girlfriend. Really? Tazuna raised an eyebrow as he raised his right hand and started listing examples. She brings you lunch every day. She greets you with a hug and a kiss. She's practically attached to your hip when she's here. You hate to see her leave but you love to watch her go. Tazuna's eyes widened as if he had just had an epiphany, though in reality he had just seen an opportunity, for the girl in question had just shown up, and she was within earshot. You're right, brat. She's not your girlfriend, she's your wife. Tazuna cackled as he saw Naruto turn so red you could fry an egg on his forehead, while Haku was faring better with only a pink dusting to her cheeks. Unknown to Tazuna, His words painted an image in Naruto's mind that would make the likes of Kakashi and Jiraiya proud. Naruto was imagining returning to his apartment after a long mission only to open the door to be met by the scent of Haku's tantalizing cooking. He turns the corner into the small kitchenette and sees Haku standing behind a table stacked with mouthwatering dishes. Yet it's not the food that makes Naruto drool, but Haku, who was wearing a smile, an apron and nothing else. Mesmerized, Naruto watches her glide around the table, a gentle sway to her hips, a slight bounce to her perky S, as the soft pattering of her bare feet on the hardwood floor, a smoldering look in her eyes as she draws closer and closer until they are finally chest to chest. "Okari, Anata," she'd whisper against his lips as she greeted him with a kiss, "would you like dinner, a bath or me?" "I'd like you, Haku-chan," Naruto replied dazedly, his eyes glazed over. Naruto was so lost in his fantasy that he didn't even feel the hand shaking his shoulder, or the slight trickle of blood going down his nose. "Era," a cool breath caressed the shell of his ear, "is Naruto-kun having eki thoughts about me?" Naruto stiffened at the question. His blue eyes shifted to his left to be met with the pair of chocolate-brown eyes that have starred in his dreams of late. The eyes were twinkling with a glint of mischievousness that was mirrored by the impish smile below them. "And no, Haku-chan," Naruto was able to stutter out. Haku playfully pouted, and Naruto had to quell the overwhelming urge to kiss the look off of her lips. "That's too bad," she sighed morosely, as she snaked her arms around his neck and down his chest as she hugged herself to his back. "I wouldn't have minded, Nata," she punctuated her claim with a tiny nibble to his left ear. Simultaneously, 100 Naruto clones went up in smoke alongside their creator's brain. The last thing Naruto remembers is the sound of Haku's giggles and the feel of her soft chest. Tazuna groaned, "Looks like we're having lunch early today." Naruto awoke to the feeling of delicate fingers running through his hair. He opened his eyes to see Haku staring off into the distance, looking as if she was lost in thought as she absent-mindedly ran her fingers through his hair. "Haku-chan," Naruto rasped, his voice slightly dry from sleep, "are you okay?" The sudden question caused Haku to jump, and nearly dislodged Naruto from her lap. Wait, her lap. Naruto's eyes were in danger of popping out of his skull at that realization. Yet before that could happen, Haku looked down and gave Naruto a gentle look that put him at ease. "Enjoy your nap, Naruto-kun." "Yes," Naruto replied. He then repeated his question from earlier, "Are you okay, Haku-chan?" Haku tilted her head, her long black hair swaying with the movement. "Why do you ask, Naruto-kun?" "I don't know," Naruto shrugged, or did his best attempt at a shrug, kind of hard to shrug when you're laying down, he soon discovered. "It just looked like you were thinking hard about something." "Oh, I was just thinking about a patient of mine." Haku let out a groan dripping with frustration, "He's proving to be a bit troublesome." Naruto let out a chuckle at her choice of words. Haku arched an eyebrow. "What's so funny?" "Nothing. It's just you reminded me of my friend, Shikamaru. The word, troublesome, is like his catchphrase, though he thinks everything is troublesome." Naruto explained, making air quotations with his hands when he said, "troublesome," the second time. "So is your troublesome patient the one we gathered herbs for?" Naruto asked. "Yes," Haku nodded. "He wants to get up and move, even though I've told him he needs to rest." "Honestly, just what am I going to do with him?" Haku said with a long-suffering smile. "Sounds like me," Naruto grinned. "I can't stand being stuck resting." "Really?" Haku asked as she leaned forward, sliding her fingers from his scalp and cupping Naruto's chin, her long hair curtaining their faces. "So you don't like laying in my lap?" she asked cutely. Naruto's brain froze. What was the right response? He either says yes, and more than likely subject himself to more of Haku's teasing, or he says no, and makes himself a liar because lying in Haku's lap was the most comfortable Naruto can ever remember being, as well as potentially offending her. Haku must have seen the panic and indecision on Naruto's face and decided to pity the poor boy. It's okay, Naruto-kun, Haku reassured the boy as she traced his jaw with her thumbs. If I didn't want you sleeping on my lap, you wouldn't be. When she felt the tension in Naruto's jaw recede, Haku leaned back and decided to continue their previous conversation. Where were we? Oh yes, my patient. He's getting restless because he's been on bedrest for the past week. What happened to him? Naruto asked. He got into a bit of a scrap about a week ago, Haku answered. Naruto raised an eyebrow. A bit of a scrap? What kind of scrap leaves someone on bedrest for a week? Sounds like more than a simple scrap. True. Haku gave a sheepish grin, but this isn't the first time he's been in a situation like this, so I suppose I don't see it as that big of a deal. Really? And what does this man do that gets him into so many scraps? Naruto asked, as he got up from her lap, a suspicious look on his face. Private security, Haku stated. And how long have you known this man? Naruto asked, his eyes narrowed. Naruto did not like the idea of his Haku-chan being around someone who liked to get into dangerous situations. He's been my guardian for the past 8 years, ever since. Haku trailed off as she clutched her necklace through her kimono, a slight frown on her lips. Naruto frantically changed the subject, not wanting to see Haku upset. So what's your guardian like? He's a little rough around the edges but he's got a good heart, Haku said fondly. In fact, I've told him about you. Really? Like what? Naruto asked, sounding curious. Hopefully she didn't mention anything embarrassing, like him fainting. I've told him I've met a sweet ninja boy with the brightest blue eyes, one that I'm interested in, Haku admitted, drawing a smile from Naruto. After I told him that he's just been dying to meet you, Haku clasped her hands in front of her face as she gave Naruto the dreaded puppy eyes. Would you please meet with him, please? It would mean the world to me. Sure. Haku-chan, anything for you. Naruto chirped. Haku was so overjoyed that she couldn't help but give Naruto a big hug as she repeatedly said, thank you, into his ear. This lasted for a few seconds until Haku pulled back and looked into Naruto's eyes and told him, just remember that he wants to meet with you, not hurt you. Naruto chuckled good-naturedly. I think I can handle a bodyguard, Haku-chan. Oi, brat, quit cuddling with your girlfriend and eat your lunch, break's over in 10 minutes. Tazuna yelled. As if on cue, Naruto's stomach decided to interject with a growl that a Biju would be proud of. Naruto and Haku both looked at each other, then proceeded to laugh. Scene change. Kaden. Gokaku no Jutsu, Fire Release. Grand Fireball Technique, a giant fireball 3 meters high and 2 meters tall roared across the sea, boiling the water and leaving a trail of steam in its fiery wake. Impressive, Sasuke, Kakashi complimented, as he stood beside the boy on Tazuna's dock and watched the technique sustain its form for a dozen more meters before it started to dissipate into embers. How do you feel? Sasuke smirked. Good, Kakashi-sensei. I could launch a fireball of that size 4 more times before I begin to feel strained. And before we started tree walking? Kakashi asked. Sasuke frowned, thinking, maybe 2 of that size, and I would be exhausted afterwards. Kakashi nodded sagely as he began to lecture his student, and that is why we train in chakra control, for what technique is useful if it leaves us exhausted and vulnerable after one use. Even the most vile people we can imagine may have friends or at the very least, subordinates, waiting in the leaves, poised to strike. Kakashi observed his student tense at the words, most vile people. Kakashi suppressed a weary sigh, for he didn't need to be a Yamanaka to know what thought was going through Sasuke's mind at the moment. Patience, Sasuke, Kakashi clasped Sasuke's shoulder. The person you are aiming for had to learn these things the same as you do. That person, Sasuke hissed, was stronger than I am at the same age. True, Kakashi acknowledged. But you have an advantage. Sasuke's eyebrow raised, that advantage being, you have a village behind you. Kakashi held up a hand to forestall Sasuke's retort. I know you might not think it's much, given what they did to one of the more powerful clans. Most powerful, Sasuke interrupted. Kakashi threw a glare laced with killing intent towards his genin to silence him. A few seconds passed before Kakashi continued. As I was saying, given what was done to one of the more powerful clans in the elemental nations, it's unsurprising that you would be doubtful of the power of our village. But do not forget that Konohagakure no Sato has come out the victor in all three of the shinobi world wars, marking us as the strongest of the big five. Furthermore, a missing nin, even a powerful one, will never know rest because of the price on their head. Even more so for missing nins with bloodlines. Pray you don't become a missing nin, Sasuke, because there are some villages that will stop at nothing to see the Uchiha bloodline extinguished or under their control. And which type is Konoha? Sasuke couldn't help but ask. The latter, Kakashi stated simply. Though, Kakashi's voice adopted a hard edge as he squeezed Sasuke's shoulder. There are some members on the council who want Konoha to be the former. Don't give them a reason, Sasuke. Sasuke stared at Kakashi, his eyes focusing on the Sharingan eye that was hidden beneath the Jonin's height, as long as they help me avenge my clan. And if they don't? Kakashi's one visible eye narrowed as he stared down his genin. Sasuke opened his mouth to respond when Tsunami yelled, "Lunch is ready. Come and get it while it's hot." Kakashi yelled back, "Coming, Tsunami-san." The Jonin then released his student. "Go inside, Sasuke. We'll talk about this later." Kakashi watched the last loyal Uchiha of Konoha stuff his hands into his shorts and walk into the house. Kakashi looked towards the sky and asked, "Obito, what am I going to do with your clansmen?" Scene change. An elderly man wearing shabby brown clothes and a straw hat leaned heavily on his walking stick as he hobbled his way down the dirt road of Nami no Kuni's largest village, and what he saw saddened him greatly. What's happened to this place? The elderly man thought, as he glanced to his right and saw a girl who was no more than 7 tugging on passing strangers' pants, begging for food. Sadly, she was not a unique case. In fact, she was the 4th child the elderly man had seen begging for food as he walked towards his destination. Though the signs of poverty didn't stop there, boarded up stores, houses in disrepair, and every person he passed seemed to wear despair like a pair of well-worn clothes. As the elderly man walked into one of the few grocers who was still open, noting with incredulity at the empty displays, bare shelves and the high markups for staple foods like rice. He stopped in the center aisle as he saw something that nearly made him snap his walking stick in half. The shopkeeper had his face pressed into a countertop by a meaty hand belonging to a man who appeared to be the misbegotten love child of a bear and a pig. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that every shopper was averting their eyes, and refused to do anything. "Where's your payment?" the bear pig snorted, as he pressed the shopkeeper's face deeper into the countertop. The shopkeeper, a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair, screamed out, "I don't have it." "Really?" the bear pig mimed, looking around. From all these empty shelves business must be booming. The bear pig chuckled darkly at his own joke. "Arg, I haven't had anything to sell," the shopkeeper tried to explain, as he squirmed beneath the giant's grip. "Just take everything in the register, there's 3,000 ryo. That's 800 short, Kato," the bear pig stated as he drew a single-edged tanto from the sheath on his waist, the 12-inch blade looking the size of a toothpick in the bear pig's giant paw, and Gato-sama doesn't like being shorted. The bear pig wrenched Kato's head to the side and pressed the blade to Kato's ear. "Now, which ear do you not want me to take?" Just before the bear pig could mutilate Kato, a thud to his right drew his attention. The brute turned to see 2 bags of rice, a bottle of soy sauce and a package of dried seaweed placed in a pile near the register with an elderly man standing next to it. "Excuse me, Sonny," the elderly man said. His voice was high-pitched and seemed to whistle with every word, probably due to the gap formed from his missing teeth, "but I'd like to buy these from Kato-san, if you don't mind." The bear pig let out a as he thought about what he was going to do. He looked down at Kato and tapped him on the cheek with the flat of his blade, enjoying how the man flinched. "Oi, how much is the old man buying?" Confused, Kato began to ramble out, 2 bags of rice, a bottle of. Kato was cut off by the tip of the Tonto blade digging into his cheek. He tried to squirm away, but the brute had a vice grip on his head. I can see what he's buying, the bear pig said as he ignored Kato's scream of pain. I want to know how much it's worth. N957 Ryo. Kato quickly replied. Looks like it's your lucky day, Kato. The bear pig removed his knife from Kato's cheek and flicked the blade, spattering the floor with Kato's blood. Ring him up, the bear pig ordered as he released the shopkeeper. Kato quickly scurried behind the register and began ringing up the elderly man who just stood there watching the events with a placid smile on his face, as if watching a shopkeeper get shaken down and nearly maimed was an everyday occurrence. Why, your total is 957 Ryo. Would you like a bag? As sure as a toad croaks, Sonny, the elderly man smiled as he stretched his liver-spotted hand over the counter to give Kato his payment. Kato's eyes slightly widened at the man's choice of words. I'll be taking that, the bear pig interjected, as he thrust his big mitt underneath the elderly man's hand. And I think 157 Ryo service fee is warranted. The bear pig threw a look at Kato, a look that was begging the shopkeeper to argue with him just so he'd have an excuse. Yet Kato simply nodded his head. TCH, the bear pig spun on his heel and lumbered out of the shop, yelling over his shoulder, see you next week, Kato. As soon as the brute left, it was as if a great pressure was lifted off of the store, a couple of the shoppers sending the elderly man grateful looks, while all of them refused to look Kato in the eye. Something that Kato didn't register because his eyes were still trained on the door that Gato's brute had left from. He had been so close to being maimed, maybe even killed. But before his mind could travel down that dark path, he felt something soft being pressed into his right cheek, a handkerchief, one that was slowly being stained red with blood. Kato-kun, the elderly man said in a deep voice rumbling with power, explain. Unbidden, tears started streaming down the shopkeeper's face, the handkerchief now soaked with his blood and tears. Jiraiya-sama. Scene change. So your boyfriend's coming to visit tomorrow. Should I put out the good china and put on my best neck bandages? Zabuza joked as he ran through some katas with Kubikiribocho, all under the watchful eye of Haku. She had told him he could get up and get some exercise, but that he was not allowed to channel any chakra until the day after tomorrow lest he risk damaging his tenketsu and chakra network. Haku rolled her eyes, as she felt her bangs flutter from the force of Kubikiribocho as it cut through the air. Yes, Zabuza-sama, Naruto-kun is coming over here tomorrow. And you will not threaten him. Zabuza paused before his next swing and turned towards his apprentice who was sitting on a recently created stump. Even without chakra, Zabuza could cut through the thick trees around their hideout, it just took more swings than usual. You really like this boy, Zabuza observed. Even in the dying light of the setting sun, which stretched the shadows of the trees and cast the clearing in shadows, Zabuza could see the soft smile on his apprentice's face. He has eyes like mine, Zabuza-sama, she said gently. When I look into them, I feel like I've found someone who can understand me. And do you think he'll understand? You haven't been entirely truthful, Haku, Zabuza warned her, not wanting to see his precious apprentice get her heart broken. Haku nodded her head. He'll understand. He might not be happy, but he'll understand. Because I like him a lot. And I believe he feels the same way. Haku then gave Zabuza a bright smile that could light the darkest caves. You should have more faith, Zabuza-sama, it's your plan after all. I know, Zabuza acknowledged as he retook his stance, his feet shoulder-width apart with his left foot forward and his right foot back. Kubikiribocho held level with his waist. He took a step forward with his right foot as he slashed horizontally from right to left with a cut that would split a man's hips from his torso, but Zabuza didn't stop there, for with strength honed from years of using the mighty blade, Zabuza halted the blade's momentum, twisted his hips and executed a slash from left to right, the equivalent of a 1-2 combination with Kubikiribocho. The 2 slashes occurred in less than a second. Tomorrow, Zabuza stated as he reset his stance and prepared to strike again. Everything will change. Scene change. It was a moonless night with the skies covered by clouds as Gato, flanked by his bodyguards Zori and Waraji, stood on his private dock, waiting for the Mizukage's agent. Boss, do we really need this Kirinin? Us. Waraji pointed to himself and jabbed a thumb towards his partner, and some of the boys are more than enough to murk Zabuza and those Konohanin. None of them noticed a subtle mist start to rise up from below the dock. Yeah, Zori agreed. Have you seen the reports from our boys in town? Other than Hataki, the other ninja are brats. Zori then chuckled, though I hear the Mizukage's a brat too. The mist had surrounded their ankles, though for Gato it was more around his shins, and